You know, I lived in New Hampshire for 7 years, and I lived down in Windham, and I know the further north you get, the more conservative it gets, right? So anyways, I'm glad to be here with you today. I'm in Congress, okay, I've been there 11 years, and I got elected the same year that Ron DeSantis got elected. And when I got to Congress, my mom asked me, she was worried about me up there. She said, "Are you making any friends?" And I said, "Mom, I thought you didn't want me to make friends with them. They got a 9% approval rating." I said, "I'll make friends with the 9% that people approve of." And Ron DeSantis was one of the few people I met that my freshman year in Congress who had any common sense. And the brains to go with it, too. You don't get those two in the same package very often. So we would go out to eat, and we would talk about things and how crazy the whole swamp was. And I thought, this guy's going to run for governor someday. He's got what it takes. And the thing about Ron is, even though he and I didn't always vote the same way, I knew he was voting on principles, and I knew how he would vote. I could predict it based on his principles, and he knew how I would vote. So it was great to have at least one friend up there. And you know, we would talk about issues. One of them was the Second Amendment. I can tell you, he is the most pro-Second Amendment candidate in this race, and that's based on his voting record and the conversations I've had with him. Before I even ran for any office, my litmus test for does somebody understand the Constitution was the Second Amendment. I would ask a politician, like a local one, like, "What do you think about the Second Amendment?" And if they said, "Oh, I love to duck hunt." Like, wait, I don't think you understand the Second Amendment. Yeah, it definitely allows you to duck hunt, but that's not why they put the Second Amendment in there. And that was my litmus test for many years. But then something happened called COVID. And the whole Washington, D.C. went nuts. Okay? They were going to pass $2 trillion up there with nobody in the chamber. They said it was too dangerous to come to work, so everybody stay in the States, and we'll just pass it on unanimous consent with nobody here. And I said, that's twice of the money we've ever spent in 1 year, and you're going to spend it with nobody there? I don't think so. I got in my car at midnight, and I drove from Kentucky to Washington, D.C., and I got there by 9 a.m., and I objected. It only takes one person to object. And they hated my guts in Washington, D.C., because they could not pass that bill without putting at least half of 435 people on airplanes and bringing them to Washington, D.C. And they were mad. I said, if truckers are still working, and nurses are working, and farmers are working, and that bagger at the grocery store is carrying your groceries out to you so you can eat dinner without going in that store, then you as congresspeople can sure as heck get your butts to work. So I stood strong. It was called the CARES Act. It had $1,200 checks for everybody in there. That was the cheese in the trap, I'm telling you. I said there would be inflation, there would be shortages if you pay people not to work, and you're basically going to fund the blue states to shut down their economies for as long as they want. This is a bad idea. Well, I got crossways with a certain president at the time who was in favor of the CARES Act. President Trump was mad at me, and I was running for re-election myself, and my whole goal was to keep him from getting mad at me, but I kind of screwed that up. Because he called me while I was on the floor of the House getting ready to object. And if I walked off the floor of the House, they would just pass the bill, and history would go by, and nobody would go on record. So I let his call go to voicemail. And he called again, and I let it go to voicemail. And he called again, and I let it go to voicemail. And then somebody got a hold of me and said, "You need to call the president back." So they yielded some time for debate, and I went outside and I called him up. And he came on the line. He said, this was over the $2 trillion that he wanted to spend that I said would be bad. He said, "I'm coming at you like you've never seen. Never in your life before have you seen the way in which I will come at you. I'm more popular than you in Kentucky, and I'm back in your primary opponent, and you're gonna lose." And I tried to explain to him the Constitution required us to be there and vote. And he screamed at me for 2 or 3 solid minutes. And then he hung up on me, and I figured I would lose, and I had nothing to lose. So I went back in there and I demanded a vote. And Nancy Pelosi called me a dangerous nuisance on national TV. I think we need more dangerous nuisances. Well, I had this friend who used to be in Congress, but he got elected to governor. And a few weeks later, he saw I was still getting hammered by the media and the press, and even my Republican friends were hating me in Washington, D.C. Ron DeSantis called me up, and he says, I see you're taking all kinds of heat for this, and I know why. The polling is against you. Most of America, including most Republicans, are for the CARES Act. He said, but it's going to wreck our economy. And you are doing the right thing, Thomas. And he said, in fact, I'm going to do the same thing here in Florida. I'm not going to shut down our schools. I'm not going to close down our beaches. I'm not going to kill the small businesses here by forcing them to close. I'm keeping our state open. And I know that the media is going to vilify me for it. I know the president is against me, just like he was against you. But he said, in 2 years, though, in 2 years, I think people will see that we were right. So we need to do the right thing now, even if they're mad at us. And I thought, oh my gosh, a politician who thinks 2 years ahead? And most of them can't think 2 days ahead. They can't think past the next tweet. And I thought, this is a guy, I sure as heck, I hope he runs for president. I hope he will do it, because this is the kind of leadership that we need in Washington, D.C. And that's my litmus test now. Where were you 3 years ago when the world was losing its mind and you were supposed to be a leader? Did you call off work? Did you try to stay home? Or did you get in front of the cameras? Did you do the right thing? Did you tell the people that work for you to keep your economy open? Or were you pushing the wrong bills? Or were you trying to make money off of it somehow? One of the candidates in this race was trying to make money off of COVID. And Ron DeSantis is the only one who passes the Second Amendment litmus test for me, because you don't take the guns first and then do due process, which somebody's famous for saying. He passes that litmus test, and he passes the biggest freedom litmus test, which is not to take away your liberties when there is an emergency. Because we're going to have emergencies, and that's what the Constitution is for. And that's why you need a president who follows the Constitution. And that's why this man, Ron DeSantis, has my full and complete support. If he will come out here and greet you all.